Welcome back to Village TV, and this is Startup Alleyway. I'm joined here by Chris, the ultimate disruptor. Chris, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you, Sean.
And I got to tell you guys, we're going to ask you a question, and this is a serious question. The fact that 50 to 80% of weddings or marriages are potentially now defunct. This industry, called the wedding industry, surely can be disrupted. Now, Chris, let's talk about this. Why do you think that the whole marriage and wedding industry can be disrupted?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. It's one I've given it a whole lot of thought. So firstly, before I answer the question, my objective is not to go in and suggest the marriage industry's failed and it's bad and he shouldn't do it.
Okay.
But what I do say is that, like everything, why isn't there some options? Now, interestingly enough,
Options other than 50% divorce rates.
yeah. So in other words, it's kind of like you or me like one another. It doesn't matter, boys, girls, or
We're not judging.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who, but it's kind of like, so let's have a relationship and we all go off and we all do marriage. It's kind of like that's the only option. What I'm saying is imagine if there was a choice. Now, interestingly enough, in France, which, without going into a whole long conversation about France, but they do have an alternative there. So they have the marriage industry and they also have something which is pronounced something very similar to PACT, which is PACS. So, and PACT, what PACT essentially is, it's essentially a celebration of a relationship whereby on day one they have exit strategies built into it.
An exit strategy for getting married.
So an exit strategy sounds totally ridiculous, and I've had people laughing in my face, quite understandably. But it's on the
basis. It seems better than the 80% of people getting divorced. I mean, it's like, most people just sort of like, I'm about to get married, by the way.
Yeah,
so
right.
I look at this and I go, I don't know. Basically, we've been together for 2 years.
Right.
We're about to get married, and then we're going to have children, and then we're going to live happily ever after.
Right. Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to work.
Well, it doesn't insofar as the greatest challenge is the marriage industry is a little bit like the Titanic. It was a great ship, brilliantly designed, fantastic minds behind it, but it sank. And the problem was
it looked good.
Is that most of us, including me, I love to go into things quite often because I'm really excited, and I can only see as far as today. The thing about a relationship is long term, and in business, I often say in business, the difference between great businesses and businesses that just struggle and go from week to week is that great businesses always have an exit strategy.
So how do you plan to have an exit strategy in marriages?
So I guess an alternative is, let's suppose in the United States or in Australia we decided to come up with an alternative. I would say let's look at the French system. Let's look at what they're doing over there. Why is it working well? Why statistically is the French alternative, according to all the research, and this is all available on Google, why is it working so much better? And I think a lot of it's got to do with the fact that people talk about stuff. A great thing is you get married and so on, and then kids come along and values come up, and it's kind of like, but I don't want to send him to that school, or I don't want to send him to this school. I'm saying part of the whole process is to do the personal growth stuff.
Okay.
And another interesting piece of understanding about law, as I understand it, I'm not a lawyer, but I've spoken to enough lawyers now, is I don't want to have an arrangement with you where I'm married to the state, because legally the state is actually the person that you get married to.
That seems ridiculous.
I don't want to go into sovereign law today. I'm not a lawyer, but it's interesting. Essentially, most marriages are essentially a relationship between you and the state.
No wonder it goes wrong.
Yeah, so I don't want the state involved in my relationships. I want the state supporting my relationships.
Yes.
So back to your original question, why is this space so open for disruption? Well, I can assure you, I've spoken now to hundreds of people, and I get enormous charge out of this subject. To disgust and mayhem and, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? Well, yeah, I'm crazy because I'm suggesting that the entire marriage industry, which is worth billions of dollars, it's time to start asking questions. Classic Simon Sinek, it's all about the why. Yeah? So, and I honestly believe, hand on heart, one of these days I want to be in an ongoing relationship, but I don't want to be in a marriage relationship. I want to be in a relationship, that's got stuff built into it, and which includes exits. It's kind of like, hey, if we grow to the point whereby we want to grow forward, it might mean we might have to reinvent ourselves.
So when you talk about an exit, what do you think we should be putting in place for an exit?
Oh, I mean, the first thing is to put it on the table day one, which is what would happen if we were going to exit.
Okay.
I mean, to me, by even having this discussion, it puts energy back into the relationship because it takes a lot of guts.
Yeah.
And
it's something most people hide away from, let's be honest.
Hey, I've been like that all my life. I would never even have had this conversation because it sounded silly. Number two, I didn't really want to expose my vulnerability to, questioning that, love is one of those subjects.
It's forever, baby. It's forever.
It's like, I was a believer in love, and I still am. But essentially, this is about energy. Looking at hard physics.
Yeah.
Look at secondary law of thermodynamics, which is, we're not going to go into that today, but this whole thing is about energy.
Yeah.
It's all about how do you manage energy. To me, it's not just about doing what everybody else is doing, and I'm not suggesting that people shouldn't get married. I'm suggesting
we're all for love.
We're
all for relationships.
I'm all for love, and I'm all about putting lots more energy back into the long term because there's time. Time is the thing that people don't often talk about.
Yeah.
What happens if I grow up and you don't grow up? It's kind of like, why should we hang around if we're kind of growing away
from each other? And so I guess an exit strategy means that you know where you stand and you can happily and comfortably do that.
Totally, and it's having this, and it's also embracing the environments that people can have this conversation because it brings up a lot of charge for people. Lots of charge.
Oh, I've got to say, it also probably makes it, more comfortable and more easier and less violent for a lot of relationships that are going through the turmoil of today's marriage.
Yeah, and that's and that really disappoints me. I mean, all the stuff that I hear about from, specialists, consultants, psychologists, personal growth programs, there's a lot of pain going on around the world. Only because a little bit like pre the internet, there was never an alternative, like Uber with taxis. There's a lot of pain that's been created in the taxi industry globally, and I'm suggesting the pain ain't going to go away because the market is going to change the market. Now, as a disruptor, my job here is to get the whys out there, and if I.
So, what conversation do you want to have with people? I mean, like, what do you want people to join in conversation with you about?
I'll give you a great instance. When I go and meet people, rather than saying how you going, or how are you guys going, I actually like to say to people, tell me, Sean or whoever, tell me the three best things about your relationship. Now, and I do this. People kind of look at me because I don't ask these questions. And then I'll flip to what's the three worst things about the relationship. Now, that sounds crazy and improbable, but I'm suggesting why don't we ask these questions? Because it's about the why.
Because they're scary.
It's scary. It just brings up fear.
Yes.
Yeah.
You challenge people, mate.
I do try to challenge people, and the interesting thing is it's a powerful conversation to have. And what I'm finding, at first there's a lot of resistance, but I'm getting people ringing me up now and coming back to me now, suggesting there is a huge market called the relationship industry.
There you go. There's a market out there. I think so. When you have failure rates that big, or when you have unsuccessful relationships and marriages of disproportionate society, there has to be an alternative. And I think we have to open up this discussion and this debate about what that alternative is. Look at societies that are having better success rates and have alternative options, and consider them in our own society. But I also think it's what you've said very well, Chris, is that we need to ask different questions. And we need to ask questions that challenge us, provoke us, just as we do in business and life in terms of challenging ourselves personally. We need to challenge ourselves in relationships.
Can I say one other thing as well? And at the same time, I want to mention about all the successful relationships out there, because there are tremendously successful relationships. How we can take all that successful stuff and restructure that information so people can learn the stuff. You know what I'm saying? So this is, again, not about suggesting the system itself has failed. I'm saying the technology needs to be readdressed. It's the marriage relationship technology. I want an alternative.
There you have it. So think about it. What is that alternative? How does that alternative look? How can we use technology to create a better alternative for when you get married? If you want to have this conversation and other conversations of disruption, I encourage you to have a chat with Chris. Connect with him and join that conversation, because I'm sure you can find a better alternative. Chris, thank you for the show, mate. Glad to have you back on, yeah? Startup Alleyway, it's where we talk about disruptive things.
We do, we love it.
And we welcome you to join that conversation. Until next time, we'll see you then.